Yeah, it's a very, very sweet introduction.
That's almost, I almost feel like we can't match that. Can we? I can't. So thank you for coming here. You actually were scheduled to be in Washington, D.C. earlier in the year, but you were unable to make it, right?
Oh, yes, that's correct. Yeah.
But so you had to write a book to get here, but we're obviously appreciative. So just to start out, this book, based on a true story, a memoir, how would you describe that to people?
Well, I don't know. It's hard to describe things, but that's what I learned when I tried to write a book. But I would just, I don't know. It's, I decided to skip past facts and go for truth.
That's helpful. So, so it's not totally true. That's what you're saying.
No, I mean, when you look at your life, which writing an autobiography forces you to do, you start to understand that most of your life is, I found anyway, I wake up in the morning, I eat my Count Chocula. Then I say, I got to get a ham and cheese sandwich for lunch. I'm thinking all the time, right? I say, I got to get groceries. And, but this Count Chocula has not digested yet. And then I go eat. So anyways, most of your life is finding and eating food. Which doesn't make for a great read.
Yeah. You didn't consider a cookbook. No.
I guess that's why cookbooks are so. That's why cooking is so.
But we would argue, knowing what you've done in your life professionally, the part we know about, it's been very interesting. You've mixed and worked with some of the most fascinating people in entertainment, right? Yeah. No.
Well, here's the thing with backstage things. They're not interesting at all. Like on the stage is what's the interesting part. And then backstage, it's just guys eating ham sandwiches.
It's all eating.
Yeah. And they're trying to figure out what to do on stage, you know? And they're saying, is there any way we could work some eating of food into this sketch? No, but, you know, that's what show business is, on stage. And also, most of the interesting things that have ever happened to me before I had any measure of fame. Because once you have fame, you're in a bit of a cage against which, you know, like one time I think I told you, did I tell you about my fight in New York City?
No, I have not heard about your fight in New York City.
I used to fight all the time when I was in Canada before I was famous.
Like a professional boxer? Or, no, just fighting.
I was not a prize fighter.
I just wanted you to say prize fighter.
Just in bars and so forth. And anyways, I was in a bar in New York City, and I hit a guy, and he went down. There was some broken glass and stuff. And so I was like, oh my God, I'm on the TV. I forgot. Because I was on the TV.
Yeah.
So I ran out of the bar, and the guy said, hey, who are you anyway? And I said, Dana Carvey.
That's good.
I ever tell you that story?
No. I thought you'd say Vince Vaughn. That would have worked.
So before I was famous, those interesting things happen to me all the time. But once you're famous, you know, your life is pretty uninteresting after that.
So before you were famous, I spoke to your mother. I called her on the phone. She said you were a very good student. But also she said you were sort of an adventurer. She talked about you living on a boat for a time and working in... Now, again, some of this is in your book, right?
No,
because that's interesting.
Nothing interesting.
Yeah, okay.
Should appear in this book. But yeah, I was a bit of a scapegrace.
What? I'm sorry?
Scapegrace.
Scapegrace?
A troublemaker. I'd never do well. You know, so I travel from place to place, cause havoc, and move to the next town.
Like a traveling sort of salesman who, right?
More like a criminal drifter.
So you grew up in Canada, right? You started doing stand-up in what, the...
Ottawa, Canada.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And but
just by accident, you know, I never knew there was such a thing as a person that could work in comedy. Like I thought, you know, I had seen The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, We got it rarely in Canada, but we got it. And I thought there was like 5 comedians, and they all had nice sweaters. Like, man,
it's a nice sweater.
Thanks. And that's what I thought. And I didn't know that there was this subculture of comedians that traveled all around telling their, rather unseemly jokes to, drunk patrons, and tried to hit on waitresses and asked if all the food was free. So then when I found that out, I said, that's great, because before that I only had jobs, I only had manual labor jobs. And
like what? What's a real job you did that you would call manual labor?
Well, the cooler ones were like I was a chokerman for a logging company. And,
a what?
It's a person that puts it doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's a thing where a goddamn tree can fall on you.
Okay, all right, fine.
Every week, hey, where's Pete? That tree fell on him. So, and we all made a lot of money. We made $17 an hour. And I remember at one point I was talking to the dishwasher that everybody made fun of, old Sam. And I said, Sam, what do you make? He's like, $17 an hour. I'm like, what? So everybody made $17 an hour. So then I was like, I want to be the dishwasher. It turned out there's a huge waiting list that included almost everyone in the logging county. They wanted to be a dishwasher.
Yeah.
Because when you were washing dishes, the likelihood of a tree falling on you was highly diminished.
So you go to you start doing comedy, and what is interesting to me is we hear about this.
Cocaine is not working.
I just want to say, I don't really know about your personal life here, but I've been with you for hours and hours and hours. I'd say what?
We've been together, yes.
And I've never seen you take a single sip of alcohol, right?
No.
Yet I read the internet. Do you go there?
What's that?
The internet. Do you see?
Internet,
yeah.
Sure, yeah.
And every time you do anything, people say, he's drinking. The man's drinking again, right?
Yes, sir. And when I do stand-up, I go, I don't drink. Ha, 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 ha.
Right?
You don't drink. That's a laugh. That's rich. And I don't drink. The only thing I do is before every show I eat a fistful of acid, LSD. And my doctor, who's a broken record, is like, stop eating fistfuls of acid before your shows.
I think it works.
What does he know? That guy's a big purple dog. Well, lots of steps to that one.
That was good, yeah. I didn't know when to cut in, but I think I stayed out long enough. So you talk about it in the book, how the key to how you were able to get yourself onto Saturday Night Live. I hate to jump ahead, but
sure.
You're talking about comedy, and we have this sense there's this huge audition process, and you have to trot out all these characters. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you found yourself on that show.
Well, there is an audition process, and which I didn't know about. I thought I had the job. That's what I was told by a fellow that worked there. So I quit the job I had. I worked for the Roseanne program.
Yeah, you were a writer on Roseanne first.
Yeah. So I was contractually obligated to her. So I went to Roseanne and Tom said, "How you doing, buddy?" And I was like, "Pretty good." He was like, "So what's going on?" Wow, that kind of stuff. So I always thought it'd be good to have him and Tarantino. Like he's like Tarantino's like, so anyways, they were kind enough to allow me to go to Saturday Night Live, which was very sweet of both of them. And so I left. I moved to New York City, and then this girl Marcy Klein said, tomorrow you have to meet with Lauren. And I'm like, what's that all about? She goes, well, that's the job interview. And here I'd quit my job.
Yeah, and a good one.
Yeah, so I got really drunk, forgetting I had to go the next morning to do my job interview. And anyways, I went in, and Lauren and I had a fine talk. He's also from Canada, but he's a cosmopolite. Very cosmopolite, a worldly person.
Okay.
Are you a fucking writer?
No. I don't know these words. I write a lot of stuff.
An Oxford English Dictionary up there for Jeff.
I write a lot of things online.
He's a worldly man.
Okay,
man that would be comfortable with the King of England himself.
Yeah.
I know that's a little sexist, that comment, but here's the thing. I'm not. I come from the barren soils of the Ottawa Valley, and that's where I was born. That's where I was born a hick. I'll die a hick, and that's the way it is. So I didn't have anything to say, so I just laughed at everything he said, like I always do when I'm trying to get a job. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, Lauren says to me, That's the thing I wrote for Farley to do. I said, what if you did a thing where it was just a guy who says, he says to me way too often. So Farley would do it really funny. He goes, I met this guy and he says to me, he looks me right in the eye and he says to me, he says to me. So anyways, Lauren said, you have to go to the studio now and do 2 impressions and 2 characters. And at the time, I had 0 impressions and 0 characters. Like I could do impressions of like anybody Rich Little did. But I couldn't do anyone like, of the day, anyone O'Carrant. So, O'Carrant means...
I know that word. I'm a writer.
So, anyways, I had no way to... But then I thought when I was, he said, we'll be in touch. And I knew I was in trouble, And so I said, what do I do? And then I remembered when I was in kindergarten, and I didn't get my homework done. I would present the teacher with a shiny red apple. Right?
Yeah.
Because what would a teacher like better? The scribblings of a 5-year-old? Or eating a shiny red apple? We've been over food, the subject of food. And teachers, are highly underpaid, which I think is a sin. And a shiny red apple, it costs a pretty coin, So then I says to myself, I says, is there a way with Lorne Michaels, is there a way I could red apple the old man? And I'll tell you, Jeff, there's always a way. So in my back, I had a red apple, not an actual red apple, metaphorically. It would be perfect if I'd had an actual red apple. That's not how things work. But I had as close a thing to a red apple in my back pocket. And I'm talking about my literal back pocket.
Literal.
Oh, God, I love when people say that all the time. Don't you love that?
I do. I put it in all my stories.
People say literally constantly.
Yeah.
I don't even care that they're saying it wrong.
No.
I just don't want to hear it every third word.
I like irregardless as well.
So I took my red apple, which in this case was 6 grams of government quality morphine.
And we know what happens next.
Yeah, I was in. Lorne Michaels, luckily for me, was a hopeless morphine addict.
Norm, so I think we're seeing, it's in the book.
No, I just thought.
When you talk about bombshells, that's an example of what we'll find in this.
Oh, yes, I have bombshells. There's, it's a tell-all. Well, it's not all. It's a tell-some.
Yeah. So we're seeing it a little bit in process here, but, obviously, we watch you on late-night shows. We hear you. I just heard you on Howard Stern. We watch you on your podcast, and what we find is suddenly we're sucked into the vortex of a nearly 9-minute joke that we have no idea how it emerged or where it will lead and what will happen with it, except that it will be very funny and we'll be trying to get everybody to listen to it the next day. How do you come saying, oh, I have a I have a
Well,
joke.
you mean like a street joke, like a real
Street joke?
You mean like an actual joke?
Well, I mean, like the
Like a
moth
guy walks
joke
into a
or
bar.
the Dirty Johnny joke.
Yeah, I don't make up those jokes.
They're just out there?
No, have you ever tried to make up a joke? Like, no comic in the world can make up an actual joke. Like a guy walks into a bar and this happens. This
is startling information.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No, I thought you come with these things written down on paper, right?
No. They call like a comedian's act jokes, but they haven't been jokes for years. It changed with Alan King to observational comedy. Like talking about crabgrass in your neighbor's fucking yard or something. I don't care for Alan King.
Well, a lot of America is upset right now because there's a huge Alan King audience here.
Oh, yes,
yeah. Or maybe it's Larry King. So you're dodging this a little bit. So these are old jokes that you're stealing from Rich Little?
Not Rich Little didn't tell jokes. No, but like the moth joke, for instance. Colin Quinn told me that joke, and he said, have you ever heard of the moth joke? Meaning it was a famous joke. And I said, no. And he said, a moth goes into a podiatrist's office, and he says, I have terrible problems, doctor, and I think I'm going mad. And the podiatrist goes, oh, well, that's too bad, moth, but why come to me? I'm a podiatrist. You should be going to see a psychiatrist. Why did you come to my office? And the moth says, because the light was on.
So that's a good joke,
yes.
But that's not your joke.
That's not my joke. So I was on the Conan O'Brien show, and I was going to do one segment, and at the end of the segment, he said, we'll be right back with more Norm. I'm like, what the fuck? And I'm like, I thought a guy was going to show new Christmas toys. So I said, I don't got nothing to say. And then I remember that Colin Quinn, he said, just talk. So I remember that Colin Quinn joke, and which is about a 20-second joke, So I said, how long is this segment? Hoping he'd say 20 seconds. And he said about 7 minutes, So I made the joke 7 minutes long.
I guess that's our answer, right? Norm, one thing that's important is you have written this book, and we do at book events like this, we have people, the authors read.
Oh, read from the book?
Yeah. So we would like you to read read from the book. Yeah. All right. And then we can have more questions, conversation, whatever.
Hi, guys.
It's a great crowd. These people really appreciate you.
I love the history of the how it turned from a place of the Lord to a seedy nightclub. Then the Lord came back. It was a cool.
It's a great story.
It's a great story. Yeah. And I love houses of worship. I go to churches because I travel a lot doing stand-up, and churches, and especially old churches, are my favorite places to go. And I'm a religious person, but I'm never preachy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You've gotten into discussions with people on Twitter when they will demand that you declare that you're an atheist, right?
Yeah. People, it's very stylish to be atheist. And listen, I cannot stand preachy people. And the only thing I would say is, you can't get into heaven without Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Now, if that's preachy.
Yeah. So this this chapter you're going to read to us, it's called Tiny White Coffin, right?
It's called Tiny White Coffin because one time I saw a tiny white coffin, and it struck me as one of the saddest images I'd ever seen. So anyways, the story is about, this is just the end of the story, but at the start of the story, it's about a child. When you're a celebrity of any sort, people want things from you, especially terminally ill children. So anyways, there was a Make-A-Wish foundation, and this child wanted to come to SNL.
Natural.
And then watch me throughout the week and see how an idea became a sketch. So I said, okay, that's a wonderful idea. And I talked to him at his bedside, and I got everybody else to scram, And I was saying how touched I was that he wanted to do that. And then he said, I don't want to do that. I just made that up. I haven't liked SNL since Bill Murray left. So I said, well, what do you want me for? He said, well, do you have your Canadian citizenship still? And I said, yes, I'm Canadian, And he said, well, that helps my wish. My wish is to kill a baby seal. So we took him, me and my buddy. We went to Gander, Newfoundland, where we got the services of Edward McClintock, a cod fisherman. And he took us to the flow, and we found and the boy had a terrible cough, And Edward McClintock said he's not going to make it through the North Atlantic. And I said, but his final wish, But I worried about the boy, So many pills. But I tried to entertain him. We would sit and we'd look. The sky is so beautiful and limitless when you get to the super northern places, and we'd look at the clouds, the boy and I, and we try to find figures in them. Like I go, that cloud looks like a half-eaten pickle. The boy had not learned that life was about food yet. So he saw other things. He would go, look, there's a man with a beard. And I'd say, I don't see it. And he'd go, wait, see where that's his mouth. And then that's his chin. I go, yes, it is a man with a beard. Right, you are. And, and I go, what about that one? It's an alligator. He go, I see it's an alligator. So we both saw an alligator, and on it went. So finally, we get to we hear the odd noise I'd never heard, and Edward McClintock said, harp seal.
Yeah.
Baby harp. So we said, oh, God, thank God, because we've been on the sea for a couple of days. And we go, and then we heard gunshots. And Edward McClintock said, damn punks from St. John's with their revolvers. That's not how you kill a seal. And we said, well, how do you kill it? And he produced a rucksack. And out of the rucksack was this medieval-looking sort of thing. It was called a hack-a-pick.
Hack-a-pick.
And Edward McClintock gave instructions to the boy. And he said, a seal's skull is as thin as a shadow by. Strike him with this hack-a-pick directly above the eyes and watch as they go glassy. So the boy ran away. No, he didn't run away. I mean, he ran toward the
harp seal.
Toward the baby harp. And me and Edward McClintock and my buddy stood there, and he had such strength suddenly, this child, and he struck as hard as he could. And the blood came out. It was so red with the white behind it, just this fountain of blood. Most of it hit the boy's face and went in his mouth, and it was almost like the life of the seal itself was transferring to the child. And then me and my friend and Edward McClintock, we just stood and watched this wicked miracle unfold. And on our way back, we were all depressed and we couldn't get the image out of our mind, except for the boy who sang gay songs. I gave him his pills, and he threw them in the North Atlantic. He didn't want the pills. And we went back, and a miracle had happened. The boy was free of his disease. It was it was in the New York newspapers at the time. This was about 18 years ago. And he got a small measure of fame for it, and he got to go to Gracie Mansion, and he met the mayor, and he was on the Donahue program.
Cured.
Phil Donahue program, cured. Yeah, it was. There were other people with him that had been cured and so forth. He didn't. It remained a secret of how he was cured, but and it was barely mentioned a year later when he was struck by a city bus and killed. So anyways...
So that's where we pick up the story.
Yes, we'll pick up the story there.
Good.
Because I thought that page would be too long to read.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the story. The boy had turned 10 years old only a few days before the accident, and now he lay in Strickland's funeral home in a tiny white coffin. When all the strangers had finished looking at him and sadly shaking their heads so that all present knew their feelings on the matter, his mother was left alone in the room with the tiny white coffin, alone but for me. I lingered behind unseen while the funeral director shooed the others into a room with a sad-faced pastor who was preparing to speak. The mother stood and looked down into the tiny white coffin. Her posture, which had been rigid all morning, went slack at the shoulder and neck. Her hands remained clasped tightly in front of her. The boy was wearing a navy blue suit with a white shirt and a tie, but he still did not look like a man. I stayed quiet in the shadows so as not to disturb the moment. After a time had passed, the funeral director opened the door and quietly let the mother know that her time was up. As she turned to leave, she looked one last time into the tiny white coffin, and then she did a strange thing, a thing that I shall never forget. She straightened the knot on the boy's tie and looked to make sure that it was correct. I took in a fast, jagged gulp of air and slunk into the next room before she noticed me. There were cookies and an urn of coffee on a table in the room. The cookies were awful. None of the cookies contained jelly in the middle, which are widely considered to be the best funeral home cookies. Instead, there were only dry shortbreads. The coffee was black, and there was no cream or milk, just packets of white-yellow powder. When I poured the powder into the styrofoam cup of black, bitter coffee, it just sat in a pile on the top. When I mixed the powder in, using a black plastic stick, the coffee turned gray like dishwater. It got me pretty steamed. And I'm sure the rest of the people who had gathered felt the same way. We all went into the adjoining room and took our seats. The tiny white coffin had been placed in the front of the room, and the sad-faced pastor was standing beside it. The sad-faced pastor told us how the boy had not been an ordinary boy. He had been very special. He had been a brother and a son and a grandson and even a great-grandson. I looked over and saw them sitting there, the young and the old and the older and the oldest. The sad-faced pastor told us that some things were very mysterious, but that there was a meaning behind everything, even something as tragic as this. He then asked if anyone had anything they would like to say about the boy, and people came up, one at a time, to speak about the boy. I decided to go up to speak too, since I had experience in public speaking. Of course, I wasn't about to do my stand-up. That would be ridiculous. I pulled out the piece of paper with the speech I prepared, and then, just when I was about to read it, I suddenly changed my mind. Folks, I said, I have in my hand here a speech I wrote, a speech that's full of big fancy words, but I'm not going to read it. And I crumpled up my speech and threw it to the floor with contempt. You don't want to hear a bunch of fancy words, many of them so fancy you wouldn't even understand them. Instead, I will speak from the heart. I have never done such a thing before, but I hear it can be quite effective. So, ladies and gentlemen, bereaved relatives, youngsters who have lost a brother or a sister or a friend, the guy in the sad-faced pastor costume, the lady sitting beside him, I figure it's his wife or something. And finally, of course, the guy hanging around at the door wearing a Carolina Panthers jacket. He is clearly in the wrong room, but has the grace to hang in there till the end. I thank you all for coming. I was proud to have known this boy, and I was proud that his last wish in life was to see me do a sketch on the Saturday Night Live program. Although I cannot say I was all that surprised. I'm a very good sketch player. But this is not about me. I really shouldn't be making it about me, but this is the first time I've ever spoken from the heart. So I beg your indulgence. I feel this speech will really start to get good very soon. But it didn't. And I realized something during the next 20 minutes. As my speech moved from one inane anecdote to another, none of them having anything to do with the boy. What I realized then was that some guys are very good at speaking from the heart, and some guys just aren't. Doesn't mean one guy's better than the other. Just different. So I was honest with the people. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, I apologize for this speech. For the last 5 or 6 minutes, I've been telling you about Gordie Howe. And I think we all know what an awful, awful mistake me speaking from the heart was. So, if I may ask your help, let's try to find that speech. You know, the one with the big fancy words that I threw away some minutes ago. It's got to be around here somewhere. Here it is, a sweet old lady near the front said. I read it and thought it was very good, especially the part about how we can learn more from the children than they can learn from us. Oh, excellent, I said. I'm glad you liked that part because it's the surprise ending. So that's shot. Guess I'll just have to read it without the surprise ending. And there appears to be coffee spilled all over it. Oh, yes, the sweet old lady said. I spilled coffee all over the darn thing. Okay, well, I can't make out any of the big fancy words now at all. But it's nobody's fault. I mean, in all fairness, part of it is my fault for crumpling it up and tossing it away so cavalierly. Hey, you know, I think cavalierly might have been one of the big fancy words in my speech. Also, it's partly the sweet old lady's fault for spilling so much coffee on the paper that not a single word can be made out. But we're not here to place blame. I will say this about the young boy in the tiny white coffin. Despite the doctor's dire predictions, the boy was too tough, too resolute, too courageous to let something as small as a deadly disease defeat him. No, the boy was made of stronger stuff than that, and it took much more to defeat him. It took a 3-ton municipal bus, moving at 40 miles per hour, and driven by one Cecil Richard Anderson. To defeat this boy, I heard the deepest of sobs and looked down to see a man wearing some sort of bus driver's uniform and being held up by two women. If you cry, sir, I said, then cry with envy and not pity, for the boy is in the clouds, and he is one with the clouds. It is we who are left, who are reminded on this unacceptable day that life is swift, and yet we are blind to its mighty splendor, which can be found in the simplest of things. Things like a walk in the park, a conversation with a good friend, a deep, rich coffee leavened with half cream and half milk, and served in a sturdy mug, one with some heft, and with it a delicious cookie that's white and has red jelly in the middle. Thank you for listening, and due to the solemnity of the occasion, I would ask you to hold your applause. From there, we all went to the graveyard. The day was bright and clean, and the cool autumn air filled my lungs and made me feel healthy. A time passed, and then the hearse showed up. The pallbearers were all big men, and they carried the tiny white coffin as if it was very heavy, although it could not have weighed more than 80 or 90 pounds. There was a small hole in the ground and some dirt beside it. We stood in a circle, and the sad-faced pastor said some things in Latin, and then we formed a line. The sun was directly overhead and made the tiny white coffin ever so bright, and I took a handful of dirt and flung it down on top. Then it was the next guy's turn. Afterward, I walked back alone down a long black top road, and it was cold, and in the sky there were white clouds, and they all looked like white clouds and nothing else.
I saw that book for the first time on your coffee table, covered in.
It knocked me out, that story.
You're upset?
Well, no, something like that happened to me. But anyways, on we go.
So there's one other thing I'd like you to read, which is, I think, a chapter that really struck me. I'm speaking, totally genuinely. I read this chapter called The Final Chapter.
The final chapter.
It's called The Final Chapter.
It's not the last chapter.
Well,
of the book,
but it's called The Final Chapter, and it's not quite as long.
It's not I don't think it's funny.
But you don't always have to be funny. We're in a house of worship.
I know, yeah.
But I love that chapter because I feel like...
I was Jewish.
You were. I am Jewish.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I was Jewish for
what happened?
2 years. Well, I knew a rabbi.
Yeah?
I had many, many biblical questions when I was young, and they were never answered I was Presbyterian. They were never answered by my pastors and stuff. And then I met a fellow that was Jewish, and he introduced me to his rabbi. And so if I had a question, then like one time I had a question about the Lord's Prayer. And I said, there was a line in the Lord's Prayer that said, lead us not into temptation. And so I thought that it was without God's ability to lead us into temptation. And I asked the rabbi the question. I said, how could God lead us into temptation? It doesn't make sense to me. And he said, I'll get back to you.
And then you converted.
They study. I went to...
So can I set this chapter up briefly?
Sure.
Okay. So what I love about this chapter is that it, to me, you talk about facts and truth and on, but this is a very true chapter to me for some reason, even though it was ghostwritten, right? So I would like you to read it for everybody.
It wasn't really ghostwritten.
Yeah.
Okay. Was that what you were going to say?
I wanted to say something better, to be totally honest. I'm still kind of moved by, I mean, you read this Tiny White Coffin thing, and we're all laughing, and then you go, oh, that kind of happened. I mean, that's very...
But what did you like about that? Start again.
Okay. I just find in that chapter, it's so rare for people to be so aware of their place in life, and so self-aware, and to be actually able to...
Well, I was forced to, during writing of an autobiography, which is, it's your life, I was forced to ask myself questions and find out if I was happy or unhappy or content or malcontent or... So anyways, this is what I came up with.
Yeah.
There is the way things are, and then the way things appear. And it is the way things appear, even when false, that is often the truest. If I am remembered, there will always be for my 4 years I spent at Saturday Night Live, and maybe even more than that, by the events surrounding my departure from that program. As long as SNL exists, then so do I. When people come to see me do stand-up, it is because somewhere in their memory I live on SNL, dressed as a young Burt Reynolds, insisting Alex Trebek refer to me as Turd Ferguson. And they come to see me, and I am old and fat, and I don't mention SNL, and I do my answering machine joke that always does well. And they are happily disappointed, and after the show, they stand beside me and take pictures, the way you would with a donkey at the side of a road. They tell me they are big fans, and they don't care what their girlfriends say. They understand me, even though they know good and well that no one else does. I'm dry, they say. The next time I come to their town, they do not show up. It can be difficult to define yourself by something that happened so long ago and is gone forever. It's like a fellow at the end of the bar, telling no one in particular about the silver medal he won in high school track, the one he still wears around his neck. The only thing an old man can tell a young man is that it goes fast, real fast, and if you're not careful, it's too late. Of course, the young man will never understand this truth. But looking back now, I can see that my life since SNL has been a full sprint, trying with all my might to outrun the wolves of irrelevancy snapping at my heels. But it has all been in vain, of course. They caught and devoured me years ago. But not completely. Lorne would see to that. My foot would still make a vague imprint. Myself would still cast a faint shadow. And years later, I would write a book. And not only write it, but be in it as well. I think a lot of people feel sorry for you if you are on SNL and emerge from the show anything less than a superstar. They assume you must be bitter. But it is impossible for me to be bitter. I've been lucky. If I had to sum up my whole life, I guess those are the words I would choose, all right. I've been lucky. When I was a boy, I was sure I'd never make it past Moose Creek, Ontario, Canada, but I've been all over this world, except for Europe, Asia, Australia, Africa, and South America. Oh, and Antarctica. But that's really splitting hairs. I mean, how many people have ever been to Antarctica? I never expected to be any more than a common laborer, and I would have considered myself lucky to have achieved that. But I was blessed with so much more. I'm a stand-up comedian and have been for over a quarter of a century. I performed thousands of hours from a small club in Ottawa, Ontario, all the way to a small club in Edmonton, Alberta. Sometimes I get big laughs and I think I'm the best stand-up in the whole world. And other times I bomb and I think I'm not even in the top 5. Before I was famous, I had a whole bunch of jobs where all I needed was boots. People would look right past me in the street, or if they did look at me, it was with a mean look. But when I got famous, people would look at me and smile and wonder where they knew me from. If they flat out recognized me, they'd laugh and dance like they'd won a prize. And I'd just stand there and smile and feel warmth from their love. So, the fame made the world, which is a real cold place, a little less cold. And as for my gambling, it is true, I lost it all a few times. But that's because I always took the long shot and I never came in. But I still have some time before I cross that river. And if you're at the table and you're rolling them bones, and there's no money in playing it safe, you have to take all your chips and put them on double six and watch as every eye goes to you and then to those red dice doing their wild dance in freezing time before finding the cruel green felt. I've been lucky.
Beautiful chapter.
Thank you for clapping.
Yeah.
It makes me feel nice.
Well, I think you can understand how everybody appreciates you here and elsewhere. We actually have time for some questions, and we'd love for you to, you apparently. We have time for his questions, right? You don't want no questions?
What?
Or not him?
No, before the show I said no questions from you.
Oh, well, I didn't understand that. I was confused.
No, of course, I would love
that was
to.
a beautiful chapter, though. I just thank you for reading that, because I know that you've only, you don't read that publicly, right? No, thank you. All right, so questions.
Yeah, one of my favorite scenes in Dirty Work was you, Artie Lang, and Don Rickles in the movie theater. Can you tell us what it was like working with Don Rickles and filming that scene?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Don Rickles, he just doesn't give a fuck. So I couldn't tell how much it was an act, how much it wasn't, but Frank Sinatra, who's one of his best friends, was ill at the time. He was on his deathbed. And by the way, don't buy deathbeds. So, they're cheaper, but at some point, some things you don't scrimp on. So anyways, Mr. Sinatra was on his deathbed and, was reportedly days from moving on. And so no one knew if we should have asked Don how he was doing or bring it up or anything like that. And then I said, fuck it, I'll ask him, So we were at lunch, and I said, hey, have you seen Frank Sinatra lately? And he said, oh, yeah, it was a lot of fun. We were at a hospital, and he was going, bleh. So I was like, good Christ, So I said, well, how's he doing, Don? And he goes, let me tell you something. He goes, this is what it's like visiting Frank. I put my head about an inch from his head, and I go, I'm not Barbara. It was his wife. So, I was like, this guy doesn't fuck around. So yeah, it was a lot of fun working with the great Don Rickles. Thank you for the question.
Jeff.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, about your article in the Washington Post.
Yeah.
You wrote this guy, Kent Alterman, president of Comedy Central.
Yeah.
Why did you let him mock Norm in it?
Mock him? What do you mean?
He goes, how is Norm Macdonald not on the air? He's the president.
Yeah.
Well,
that doesn't. I don't have the authority to make him put him on the air.
You got to explain to the folks what what he's referring to.
In the article that we wrote, a profile was...
Jeff wrote.
It's a team effort. I have a ghostwriter.
I thought you wrote.
A friend, very talented. So the article I wrote, I called the head of Comedy Central because I know he's a fan of Norm's, and said, what do you think of Norm? And he said the quote that you said. He said it's a crime that he's not on the air.
Okay, well,
now, technically, he actually has some room on the air, right? Yeah.
President of Comedy Central.
Yeah, he's a president.
Said, if only I knew some way.
Yeah, right.
To undo this injustice.
The other thing all the TV executives say to you, and I love TV executives, they say, you just got to let Norm be Norm. And then you ask Norm or them about the show that he did, and they explain how they would not let him be Norm because it would never work.
Yeah, but Seth Meyers has a show. Alan King was on TV. Listen, I'm saying if Norm Macdonald was a member of the tribe, he'd be on TV.
Are you speaking English?
Who's Marty? Did he say Marty Keene?
I believe it was. I believe it was something about Jews running Hollywood. I'm not sure.
I've seen Adam Mead throw his Junas in your face a lot on the podcast.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's like he threw his voice almost. It was almost like it was coming from somewhere else.
I'm a big fan of incoherence.
Over here?
I know that stand-up is very personal for the most part.
Stand-up is?
Stand-up.
Yes. Right.
How different is it for you touring, talking about you specifically?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
How different is it for you going around talking about this book, talking about you specifically versus your take on things?
Yeah, no, it's very difficult. It's not fun. It's a little tough because I grew up in a family, not unlike a lot of families of my time, where feelings were not, meant to be expressed. Or else your dad would call you gay. My dad never called me gay, but he called me a girl.
Yeah.
And so it's still hard for me. But yeah, this is much more personal, way more personal than my stand-up comedy. And, we didn't hit on a lot of the book that's incredibly personal, But yeah, a lot different.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Norm, first of all, thanks for doing this. This is very cool for your fans to come see you in a setting like this.
Oh, that's nice.
This is great.
But it's you and the rest of these people that should be thanked for coming. So
I appreciate it, and we're psyched about the book. Glad you got the podcast going again. I had one question. I love, and I think everyone here does as well, seeing you when you were on the late night shows, and the last Letterman show that you did, your routine there, which I still have on my DVR. Is there a story you can share about either leading up to that and your feelings about it, or in the aftermath since? Because in addition to being very funny, which it was and you always are, it was obviously very emotional as well. I thought maybe there's something you could share.
Yeah. Well, I had already appeared what I thought was my last time 4 weeks earlier, and I did panel, I had not done stand-up on the show for a decade or so. So I thought that was my last one. And then Mr. Letterman phoned me and said that he would like me to be the last stand-up. And then we laughed together at how mad Jerry Seinfeld would be. So I worked very, very hard on making it, because everybody was acting so cool about Letterman leaving, and I didn't think it was cool. I was saddened by it, and because he just meant so much to me, not only personally in my career, but I just think he changed the whole culture and the way people speak and so forth. And I think he was a very, very important person in society. So I didn't feel cool or ironic about it at all. And so I wanted to, first of all, do as funny a set as I possibly could. So I worked very, very hard on it. And then I remembered when I first ever saw him ever, which was at a Toronto television show called 90 Minutes Live, hosted by Peter Zosky, where the guests were Ricky Jay and David Letterman. And David Letterman did this joke. And I remembered the joke, and I loved the joke. I told all my friends. So on the show, I did the joke. Then I was overtaken by something. It was hard to get through the joke. And then I hadn't planned this or anything, but I thought I'd say goodbye to David Letterman because nobody else was doing it, you know? And I felt someone had to say goodbye to him, for goodness sakes. So yeah, then when I said goodbye to him, I got really sad.
No, but that was a great moment and obviously very heartfelt. And again, thanks for doing this, man.
Oh, you bet. Thank you for the question.
I just want to say thank you for all of your work that you've done and all the work that you're hopefully going to do going forward. I love the Just for Laughs thing you did way back and
wow.
The ESPN Awards.
He has your shirt on.
It's a long time ago. Yeah, Norm Macdonald.
I just wanted to know, when you were writing the book and having trouble writing the book, did you find any strength or solace in knowing that if that lazy Artie Lang can write a book that you could do?
Well, I did find solace in the fact that writing a celebrity memoir was, you know, you'd have to go to a fucking limbo place to find a lower bar, you know? So I didn't think it would be that difficult.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, pal.
Yeah.
And thanks for buying that T-shirt.
Yeah. All right, we've got 9 more minutes of questions. I want to keep this right because everybody wants to get their books signed. Yeah. All right, go.
Hello, Norm. I'll just start by saying the same thing everybody else has said. Thank you for coming out here. On a personal note, you more than probably anybody shaped my sort of comic sensibility when I was growing up. I sort of idolized you.
I'm an old man.
Yeah, he's 53.
A fucking bald guy.
Yeah. I don't know what to say.
But that's very nice of you. Thank you.
My younger brother and I, when we were young, we got a video camera and we recreated the David Letterman sketch from SNL where you said, "You got any gum?" And,
and then
you got any gum? 2 years ago, when my boss retired, giving you credit, of course, I lifted your Bob Saget roast routine wholesale and applied it to her, removing some of the more questionable things.
Did that work?
It did. It actually killed. It did really, really well.
I asked because it didn't work for me.
But my question is, you're one of the most kind of like literate comedians out there. You can, especially with the book, I'm almost pretty much done reading it, and you can turn a phrase more than in ways that are more unique than anybody I've really read. And at the same time, you can have things, you know, where like you talk about dead hookers in the trunk and dirty work. How do you find yourself able to sort of move between those two modes of comedy where you do sort of like hyper literate, really turns of phrases, and then sort of the more stuff that was in like dirty work?
I think dirty work was very literate. But where do you learn these fancy words and these interesting ways of turning the phrase? I think that's what he was trying to say.
Well, I don't know.
Well, you read a lot.
I read a lot. Like I'm, as you know, completely uneducated. I dropped out of
self-educated
school when I was a boy. But you can't teach yourself. It makes no fucking sense. I've always heard that, you know. Like that guy's street smart. He might not know about Newton or Einstein, but he knows about a fella named Bob.
But you read a lot.
Bill. Yes, I do read a lot. I think, you know, I wish I was educated so I could write a book properly, but I read an enormous amount, and I'm sort of obsessed with reading. So I think that helped a lot, you know.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Norm.
Hi.
As a sports fan, I was wondering if you caught the ESPN OJ documentary and if that changed any of your opinions? Maybe you thought O.J. was now more of a murderer?
Because you were a huge supporter of O.J. Did I? When no one else would speak on his behalf, you...
Well, that's the only time I ever did jokes, because, I try to make comedy with no agenda. And I hate political comedians and political comedy. I try to make just pure comedy, but that was the only time that I felt moral outrage and righteous indignation over what was happening, and it slithered its way into the jokes.
Slithered. I like that. So, did you watch the either of the?
Yeah, I watched both, the 30 for 30 and the John Travolta vehicle.
That was acclaimed.
It was acclaimed.
I think so. Yeah, the John Travolta one. Yeah, David Schwimmer.
Yeah, David Schwimmer. Yeah. You know what I liked about that is like they go. David Schwimmer played what was his name? Rob Kardashian. And so it would open, and it would be him with his two daughters, and they'd go, "Hey, Daddy, you were recognized today." You go, "Well, let me tell you something about fame, children. Fame is fleeting." And so, anytime the story flagged a little, they go, "Hey, where's Chloe and and these children would run in.
All right, two more questions.
I'm curious.
But you want more?
No, I feel sorry for.
I feel bad for them too, but it's your event. But the people need all signing and stuff, and yeah.
Well,
three more questions.
How many people
Okay,
are
go.
here right now? There's 7 people. How about 7 questions?
Yeah. All right, if that's what they say.
8. How about 8 more questions?
All right. Slow down. All right, no more. Nobody else in the line. It's like the ice cream truck.
Well,
the man is going to drive away. Okay.
I saw a lady, and there hasn't been a lady.
But make them tight questions.
Okay, great. What was your father's favorite joke?
My father's favorite joke?
Yep.
Well, he had a joke. Roses are gray, violets are gray, tulips are gray, because I am a dog.
Thank you. That was close.
That was fast.
Yeah. It's like the lightning round.
Hi, Norm. You're not going to be here next week, so in advance to both you and Jeff, L'Shana Tova, may you have a sweet new year. My question is...
Maybe just a little closer.
Sure.
Yeah.
My question is...
To the English language. No, I'm sorry.
What's wrong with you? He's a nice man.
We had trouble understanding.
Yeah. Oh, no, for sure. So along the OJ lines, did you ever end up actually meeting anyone related to the trial or anything like that? Did you ever meet anyone related to the trial?
Related to the trial, yeah.
Or, and if you didn't, then could you answer, could you finish your anecdote that you were unceremoniously interrupted with the leading into temptation?
I did, so I don't have to do that anecdote.
Oh, fantastic.
I did, yes. One time I was doing the program, the Saturday Night Live program, and they said, Arthel Simpson, somebody like that, is in the audience. And we had an OJ joke.
Yeah.
And the poor daughter was in the crowd,
Seems like a bad place to be.
Yeah, it's very tough. So I said, can I really do this joke? I said, sure, why not?
Thank you. Good. Okay, yeah. Hopefully that answers your question fully.
So on Weekend Update, when you anchored, Frank Stallone was often a punchline. Did he know it was coming, or did you ever talk to him afterwards?
But I talked to his brother, Sylvester Stallone, who hosted the show, and he was like, what the fuck with Frank? And, so I said, it's a complete non sequitur. It's ridiculous, And so he told me, he says, the thing with Frank is, after Rocky, he decided to become a boxer. So, he'd go in the ring with it. He'd say the Italian stallion's brother. He goes, every boxer in Philadelphia just beat the shit out of him. He goes, you've never been right since, and I feel guilty about it. He says, if you could just lay it off him for a while. And I was like, no, so I never did another job.
I know some comedians have described themselves as being not terribly happy people off the stage, but finding doing stand-up to be a pretty therapeutic experience. Do you view it that way, or what's the importance of performing stand-up to you personally?
No, I'm not sad at all off stage.
Is comedy? Let me rephrase that. Do you find that comedy is a catharsis for your meaningless existence? Is that better? Sorry.
I know there's this idea. What's that story about? The guy goes to the psychiatrist. I'm very depressed. Remember that story? And you must see Pagliacci. I tell all my patients. And, no matter how depressed they are, they go and they see Pagliacci. And then they are happy afterwards. And the guy says, I am Pagliacci. So anyways, I'm nowhere near as funny as Pagliacci. I don't mean to, and I don't want anyone to infer that. But no, I'm happy, and I don't find stand-up as much therapy as I know a lot of people do. But I don't know what I find stand-up really. It makes me happy when I'm out there. And then immediately when I leave, I'm a little bit sad, I guess. And so...
That's helpful.
All the answers have to be good?
Well, I mean, we're seeing, no.
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right,
You stumped me on that one.
That was good, though, yeah.
I tried.
Norm,
I was hoping something would come out. Sometimes I begin a sentence hoping that the end of the sentence will
it sometimes
something.
works out for you.
Hi.
Hi, Norm. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for dressing so well.
Great. So my question, you're in Washington, D.C., so my question is, you hosted the White House Correspondents' Dinner a few years ago. Any reaction to that? Any stories about that? Anything you'd like to share?
Well, they always have a funny guest at the Correspondents' Dinner, somebody in the news in some way. It'll be, Monica Lewinsky, or you know what I mean. They'll invite and this year that I did it, they invited Larry Flint, the hardcore pornographer. So I met him. He was in his wheelchair with his funny way of talking. And you never feel fully comfortable around there, unless you're a very good person. I mean good like Jesus Christ of Nazareth.
Yeah.
So anyways, he says to me, he says, have you ever come to Hollywood? You come over here, I'll take care of you. So I said, you'll take care of me? So then, in my head, I was like, what the fuck does it mean to be taken care of by Larry Flint? Because, if my Aunt Ida said, come down to Manitoba and I'll take care of you, that would mean she would make a nice strawberry rhubarb pie and we'd talk, But Larry Flint, I imagine it would include me and a couple of ladies, and then him showing up in a wheelchair.
Don't never do that. Not here. This is a nightclub. All right, that's good. All right, let's shuffle through these. Yes.
All right, one of your lesser known, but one of my favorite things you've ever done is a commercial you did for the Man Grate.
God. That's an online-only thing, don't you think?
It's got like 100,000, maybe a couple of million views. And I just want to know, did they ever come around to your interpretation of their ad and their product?
No, well, what he's referring to is I have this podcast that, I do this podcast, I don't make any money out of it. And then they're like, do this commercial. I'm like, fuck, I don't even make any money. And so there was this goddamn thing called a man grate. And it weighed like 100 pounds. It was supposed to be some sort of cooking device for steak. And I had to read all this thing. And I couldn't even lift it. And I was like sweating profusely. And talking about what it was. And then, I don't know.
It gets very colorful.
Like what?
It gets very colorful.
It gets very colorful. Yeah, and I'm not going to say what I said here in a house of worship. But no, they never came around to seeing the...
that sponsorship ended.
That sponsorship ended without amicability.
Okay, thank you. 2 more.
So about 20 years ago,
yes, sir.
You and Courtney Thorne Smith were on Conan on the same night. Did anyone on stage that night know that you were going to take over her interview? And if any of them did not, what was it like afterwards?
It wasn't what it was like. What he was referring to is I was the first guest, and then Courtney Thorne Smith came on, who was on Melrose Place and had decided to leave Melrose Place to co-star in a movie with Carrot Top. So
chairman of the board, right?
Yeah, it was called chairman of the board, and so it stunned me. I said, would anyone? And so I was like, wait a minute, you left? Wait, what? And I couldn't figure it out. And as it pertains to what happened afterwards, it's not what happened directly afterwards. It is that when I did it, there were no computers. And so I did not know that it would live on forever. Back then, you would just say things. People in general vicinity would hear them. And then they would forget them. But now, I really have to make that phone call to Carrot Top. Motherfucker's ripped too.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And last question. And
a
then
lady.
I know. That's why I came up here. I was like, it's all guys.
It's about time, I say.
Seriously. So I opened your book and I saw Slash's name in there, and so I was wondering.
Oh, Slash. Yeah.
So I was wondering, when you write about other famous people, do you have to get their permission first, or is it just like, oh, whatever?
Well, you do have to get their permission normally, but my book editor, Joe Veltri, who's right there. Stand up, Joe.
Is he standing up?
Stand up. That's not standing up.
There he is. Yeah, thank you.
Joe Veltri had a great strategy, which was that we would not need permission as long as we made something so outlandishly insane that the actual true things, so for instance, if somebody came and said, hey, wait a minute, I never did that, I never would do anything like that, I could say, what are you talking about? The devil's in the book. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a big, crazy book. And then he'd go, but I really did it. And I go, yeah, I know. But he won't stand up in court. Joe Veltri will tell you so himself.
Thank you.
And they'd be scared because they'd hear the name Joe Veltri, and nobody wants to hear that name in the world of publishing.
He's an agent and an attorney.
He is. Yeah, he's an agent and an attorney.
Thank you. Did that better.
You got a joke for that?
No, I don't.
You don't?
No.
You see how hard it is?
Yeah,
Thank you for the final question.
Yeah, we got through that. I mean, it's a little later than they told me it was supposed to be. But look, thank you all for coming. We're just so lucky to have Norm in this setting. I hope we get him back sometime soon. Right? And you're going to sign the books, right? Yeah?
Sign books, yes. Anybody wants their book signed? Why, that would be fine and good.